Hi folks, I realized while I had my Time Traveler stuff out that I have a second PCB that I can't recall if I've ever tested it or not, so I have no idea if it works. And unfortunately it does seem to have a problem. When I power it on, it comes up, but the scoreboard is somewhat scrambled. This should be saying good RAM, and then in a minute it says good ROM, and goes through a few other startup tests. And eventually it gets to, normally this would say spinning Sony, and that's when it tries to access the Laserdisc player. But it actually seems like this one is not, it looks like it's saying something different. I don't know, I thought maybe it was saying spinning player or something like that. But one thing I noticed is it's not just sort of random garbage, there's a pattern to it. So one thing I learned from Adam with YouTube channel One Circuit is to look for patterns and identify if there's a stuck bit or a missing bit or something like that, and that can help you kind of narrow down what the problem is. So I noticed that if the first word is spinning, then it has F's instead of N's, and it has A's instead of I's. If I carry that over to the next word, that means it's P-I something N-E-E-R, and that's pretty close to Pioneer, so that would mean that the board thinks it's configured for the Pioneer player. I think most or all of the cabinets shipped with a Sony player, but the board does support a Pioneer serial player. I checked the dip switch for the player type, and it was in the Sony position. It doesn't matter which position I put it in. It's this always comes up trying to say spinning Pioneer. So I thought I would look for some patterns and see what I could figure out. So these are all of the binary equivalents of the characters on the display, where we had an A instead of an I, an F instead of an N, and a G instead of an O. And I split the top and bottom 4 bits so that it's a little bit easier to read. First thing to notice is that the first 4, the top 4 bits, are the same in all cases. So if you eliminate those, it's a little bit easier to read. And what you can see at this point is that the difference in all 3 cases is that the first bit is a 0 and it's supposed to be a 1. So there is a missing bit on what's being sent to the scoreboard. But another thing I realized is the dip switch for selecting the player type is the 4th dip switch, and with the binary you count right to left. So it's the 4th position. So the Pioneer is a 0 and the Sony is a 1. So again, we're getting a 0 instead of a 1. So I would say there's a good chance that those 2 things are related. And what that would mean is there's likely some sort of an I/O chip on the board that has a bad bit. So unfortunately, there's no schematics for this board, but it's relatively simple. Hopefully we can sort out what's going on. So looking at the board, here's where the scoreboard connects in, and here is the dip switch for the player type. And right near them, there's a couple of driver chips that put out a higher current signal to send out over the long cable on the scoreboard. And there's 2 82C55A I/O controllers on here. And I am guessing that one of them is responsible for both the scoreboard and that bank of dip switches. Well, I spent some time mapping out the scoreboard interface on the PCB. I got the pinout of the connector and the ICs that it goes to, just using a continuity test on my meter. So I did confirm that this I/O chip handles both the scoreboard and the dip switch that doesn't appear to be working. So I strongly suspect there's a bad bit on this chip. However, before I dig into that, I'm going to see if by chance they're unrelated issues and it's actually the driver IC that connects to the scoreboard. It has a high current driver chip for the long cable run. And I can test the input and the output of that chip to see if it's the chip that's bad or that it's just not getting any signal. So let's get the logic probe. Well, now I'm confused because it seems to actually be getting data on that line. So I don't know why it's acting like there's a stuck bit. Maybe I should get the scope on it and see if there's something weird with the voltage levels. Well, it looks like we might have an unrelated problem with the dip switch after all, because I just discovered that it does not reliably stay in the on position. If I just wiggle it a little bit, it toggles. So I'm gonna get that as firmly on as I can, power it up again, and see if it gets past the spinning up stage. Yes. So that was the problem with the player type. So that's one thing down. I'll have to try to either clean that dip switch somehow or just replace that switch bank, which I'd rather not do if I can avoid it, but we'll see. So now we have the question of why are we missing a bit on the scoreboard when the logic probe tells me that that bit is toggling. Well, the scope tells a very different story. If I look at those lines, bit 1 looks good. I've got nice pulses. Actually, that's bit 0. Bit 1 looks good. Bit 2 looks good. Bit 3 is a mess. It's just kind of noisy and it's not getting very high at all, but at any rate it's clearly not correct. But if I look at that one on the input side to that chip, 7, 6, 5, 4, the input's just fine. So I think we have a bad driver chip. Well, I didn't have an exact match in my scrap board collection, but I think I have one that's close enough. The original is an ACT 541, and I've got an HC 541. So it's a slightly different series, but I think for this application, it should be close enough. And if not, I can get a different one later. So I'll put a socket in for that chip, and now we're going to plug it in and try it out. Okay, the chip is in. Let's give it a try. Yay! That's very good. It looks like it's working. Okay, looks like we're all good. I'm going to spray a little bit of this contact cleaner on the dip switches and work them back and forth a little bit, see if that helps. But I think this board's good to go, and I can put it back in storage and forget about it for a while. Uh-oh. What is that? Error on the display. Huh. I do not know what that is. I guess I should check all the dip switches and run the contact cleaner through and see if that helps. So with the new chip installed and the dip switches cleaned and rocked back and forth, both problems appear to be solved. I thought I was being clever in the beginning and linking the two together as one problem, which would have indicated this chip, but instead of just going ahead and replacing that, I decided to verify my hypothesis, and it turned out to be incorrect, which was good because this was much simpler to change, and I happen to have a compatible chip on hand. So, as always, thanks for watching, and look for more videos in the near future. Thanks.